Good morning. So we are still reading The Boy on the Porch by Sharon Creech. Hey, Q. Give everyone a minute to get logged on here. Hi, Reagan. Maybe Riley, too. I'm not sure if she's listening as well. I see a few more people have joined. That's exciting. So we left off. Remember, I didn't read to you Friday because Friday was the parade, and I know I got to see a lot of you, and I was so excited about that. That made my day. So we left off where they also found a cow that was tied to the fence. So we were like, okay, that's interesting. So now there's this boy that's been left on the porch. There is a cow that has been tied to their fence. So we are going to see what is going on. And we know that Marta and John are really starting to feel connected to this boy. So they haven't actually reported yet that there was a child left on their porch. Chapter 13. 2 years earlier, when John and Marta had found the beagle lying in the shade on their porch, they hadn't thought much about how it came to be there. It had no collar, its ribs were shown through its dusty coat, and they assumed the dog to be another stray from an unwanted litter. Interesting, so they've also found the beagle on their porch. They didn't expect the dog to stick around, but it did, day after day and week after week, until it seemed as if the dog had always been there. So easily did he fit in, following John from chore to chore, leaning against Marta's ankles as she prepared meals, curling up at the foot of their bed protectively, and looking at them with those big black eyes. When John and Marta had found the boy on the porch, they were curious, naturally, as to why he was there, and they hadn't expected him to stay. I mean, not at first, but he did stay day after day until it seemed as if he belonged, running, smiling, and laughing his silent laugh, tapping and patting on every surface as he made his music, and painting with water, with paint, with mud, those swirly swirls and swinging trees. And now there was a new cow, and of course, there is no comparison really between a child and a cow, except that both, like the beagle, had found their way to John and Marta's, whether by accident or intention, and John and Marta, in their quiet way, accepted these additions. 3 foundlings, beagle, boy, and cow, formed an easy alliance onto each other like old pals. The beagle would lead the way across the pasture, and Jacob would climb up on the cow and ride along as the cow followed the dog to a shady spot. There, the boy might gather rocks and pile them against the fence and either rap at them with a stick, or if there was mud nearby, paint designs on them with his finger as a brush. The beagle would circle, sniffing, and the cow would munch the grass or simply stand sleepingly eyeing the boy and the dog. John and Marta might have expected, if they'd thought about it, that the boy would more likely adopt the young goats or calves as his companions. And although he did romp with them too, he spent more time with the cow and the dog. One morning, John and Marta stood in the barn doorway watching the boy, the beagle, and the cow, who were gathered a short distance away. John had just commented that he wished the boy would talk, that the silence was making John uneasy. He was worried that the boy might need something and be unable to communicate that need to them. Marta had been having the same worries, But now, watching the boy, the beagle, and the cow, she noticed a pattern in the way they interacted. John, look at that. They're having a conversation. John was skeptical. The beagle and the cow? The beagle, the cow, and the boy. That tapping and patting he's been doing, he has his own language there, I think. And the cow and the dog understand it. And Beagle, the way he lifts his head up and down, as if he means to bark. And the cow, she too, moves her head up and down and murmurs in response. Oh, Marta, I don't think that can possibly be. That's ridiculous. Watch, John. And so they watched. And it was as Marta said. The boy tapped on the fence. The dog barked in silence, flapping his mouth open and closed. And the cow swung her head left and right, up and down, and murmured, moo, moo. The boy tapped the cow's nose and the beagle's nose, and the dog flapped its jaws, and the cow murmured, moo, moo. We have been so stupid, Marta said. All the while, the boy has been talking to us, and we never even knew it. Chapter 14. As John and Marta paid closer attention to the boy's tapping and patting, they quickly noticed patterns they had overlooked before. There was a distinct rhythm to the way he greeted each of them. Tap, 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 tap. And the way he greeted the dog. Tap, tap, tap. And the cow, tap, 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 tap. And the bedtime tapping, tap, 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 tap. And the after meals tapping, tap, 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 tap. He's been talking all day long, John. Gradually, they imitated his taps so that they greeted him the way he greeted them. And they began and ended meals the way he did. The first few times, the boy reacted with his silent laugh, his shoulders bobbing up and down. But when he tapped more earnestly at other times, they didn't know how to respond. And the boy seemed disappointed. They might guess that he was asking or saying, but they couldn't merely repeat the same taps in reply. If we teach the boy to read and write, Marta, that will solve everything, won't it? He can write down what he wants to say. Marta wasn't completely convinced that the boy was unable to talk. She still wondered if he was just not ready to talk to them, or if he needed to recover from some horrible experience. Maybe he simply needed time. Always, too, at the back of her mind was the worry that the closer they came to know the boy and the more that they loved him, the harder it would be to let him go. So they've kind of figured out that Jacob is communicating through his taps. And they noticed that when he was communicating with the cow and the beagle. Chapter 15. On John's weekly trips into town for supplies, he wondered if he would discover that someone had reported a missing boy or that people were inquiring about how to find John and Marta's place. John could not understand why Jacob's family had not returned yet. John had mentioned the boy and asked around, but no one heard of the boy or seemed the least bit interested or even remembered him from one week to the next that John had asked. How can that be? He wondered. How can there be a boy nobody knows or cares about? One day on his visit to the general store, as John was buying more jelly beans, Shep said, "Your wife got a sudden sweet tooth?" "What? Oh, the candy. Haha. Thought maybe you had a kid up there. Bernie says thought he saw a kid riding a cow up at your place when he drove by the other day." "A kid? Oh, sure, the one I mentioned. Yeah, we're watching a kid." "That right?" Shep said. Yep. Watching that kid for somebody, and that kid likes to ride cows. Imagine that." On the far side of the store were shelves that carried used items. You might find bowls or pots or twine or rulers or bent spoons on those shelves. As John turned to go, he saw an old guitar on the floor, propped up against the shelves. "Are you playing that or selling that?" John asked. "The guitar? That old thing? Nah, somebody left it in here for trade. Somebody left it in here, traded for a couple of pots. You interested? I'll trade it to you for that jacket you're wearing." As John drove home, he could hardly contain himself. Wait till the boy sees this guitar. I can hardly wait to see that face of his. So we are seeing even more so that John is becoming even more connected to the boy. Chapter 16. When John presented the guitar to Jacob, the boy took a step backwards, placing his hands against his chest. He looked from John to Marta to the guitar. For you, John said. The boy took another step backwards. It's a present, Marta said, for you. It's a guitar, John added. Have you never seen a guitar? It makes music, Marta said. Listen, show him, John. I haven't played one in a while, John said. He fingered a few chords, strumming a simple tune. The boy reached out to touch the instrument. You hold it like this, John said, placing the guitar in the boy's arms. Here, try this chord. Your fingers like this. That's right. In this hand. That's right. And then you can switch to this. And those were the only instructions he gave the boy. For once it was in his arms, the boy's fingers moved along the strings slowly and tentatively at first, and then with more eagerness. And then he sat with it for hours, exploring its possibilities. And by nightfall, he was already making music. It sounded like nothing else Marta and John had ever heard. It was as if he were recreating the sounds of the forest and dawn and mountains all rolled together. The sounds moved Marta and John greatly. One minute they would be smiling, and soon after they were close to tears. It was as if the boy had control of their minds and bodies. So, we are going to stop there. So this is all just very, very interesting. So he still hasn't talked, and I see that Reagan said maybe he's a mute, and I think Wes agreed. I'm not sure yet. We're going to have to keep reading and figuring it out. But what we do know is that they still have not reported that they found a boy. And John did tell a little lie saying that he was watching him when he was talking to Shep at the store. Okay, I am going to send you a link to Canvas for our Zoom conference, and I will see you in just a couple minutes. All right, bye guys.